His name was Hannibal, Rome's greatest nightmare, the general who crossed the frozen Alps with war elephants to burn the empire down. In 218 BC, one man led a huge army and dozens of towering war elephants across the frozen, deadly peaks of the Alps to strike at the heart of Rome. That man was Hannibal of Carthage, and he would spend his whole life waging a brutal war to destroy the most powerful empire the world had ever seen. Far to the south, the mighty city of Rome trembled in fear, for no enemy had ever dared to attack them in such a bold, impossible way. Hannibal was born in 247 BC in the great and wealthy city of Carthage, a mighty trading empire in North Africa and Rome's most feared and hated rival. But Carthage had just lost a brutal war to Rome, forced to pay crushing tribute, and the proud people burned with shame and a deep desire for revenge. Hannibal's father, a fierce Carthaginian general, took his young son into a sacred temple and led him before the burning altar of their gods. There the boy placed his small hand on the altar and swore a sacred oath that he would forever be the eternal enemy of Rome. Raised in war camps in Spain, the boy trained relentlessly with sword and horse, growing into a brilliant, fearless, and utterly ruthless young commander. By the age of 25, Hannibal took command of the whole army, and the burning oath of his childhood was ready to set the world on fire. By 221 BC, the young Hannibal had taken full command in Spain, boldly conquering tribe after tribe and building the fearsome army that would carry out his revenge. When he stormed and captured a city allied with Rome, it was a direct challenge, and the furious Romans demanded that Carthage hand him over at once. Instead, Hannibal revealed his breathtaking plan. He would march his entire army overland and strike Italy from the north, through the deadly Alps themselves. He gathered a staggering force of nearly 100,000 men, thousands of cavalry, and dozens of towering war elephants ready for the impossible journey. In 218 BBC, the great army set out from Spain, crossing wide rivers and hostile lands as it pushed relentlessly north toward the distant mountains. Fierce Gallic tribes ambushed them again and again, and Hannibal had to fight his way forward through every valley soaked in blood and fear. At last, they reached the foot of the Alps, where towering frozen peaks rose before them, higher and deadlier than anything they had ever seen. The crossing became a frozen nightmare as howling blizzards, sheer cliffs, and brutal cold tore at the army with every single step upward. Sudden rock slides and avalanches thundered down the slopes, sweeping men and animals off the narrow paths into the deadly abyss below. The massive war elephants slipped on the ice at terrifying drops, and desperate handlers fought with all their strength to save the precious beasts. Thousands of frozen, starving soldiers fell along the way, and by the time they neared the top, Hannibal had lost nearly half of his entire army. Yet Hannibal never wavered, walking among his broken men, lifting them up and driving them onward with a will of pure iron. After 15 brutal days, they finally reached the summit, and there below them lay the green and open plains of Italy at last. In late 218 BC, his battered army descended from the mountains onto Italian soil, and Rome's greatest nightmare had truly begun. Hannibal wasted no time, luring the Romans into battle at the icy river Trebia in 218 BC and springing a devastating trap upon them. His hidden cavalry swept around behind the legions while his war elephants smashed their flank, and the surrounded Roman army was crushed completely. It was a stunning victory, leaving the battlefield littered with Roman shields and shattered banners, and all of Italy now shook at his name. But the war took its toll as Hannibal pushed his men through disease-ridden swamps, wading for days through miles of freezing, stinking marshland. In those foul marshes, a savage infection struck Hannibal himself, and he lost the sight in one eye forever, yet still he refused to stop. In 217 BC, he laid a brilliant trap by the misty shores of Lake Trasimene. hiding his whole army in the fog above an unsuspecting Roman column. At dawn he sprang the ambush, and his forces stormed down the hills, trapping the Romans against the water in one of history's deadliest ambushes. In 216 BC came the battle that echoes through history forever, as Hannibal faced the largest army Rome had ever raised at a place called Cannae. The Romans had almost twice as many men, and they charged straight into Hannibal's center, certain they would crush him by sheer weight of numbers. But it was a trap, for Hannibal let his center fall back into a curve, drawing the Romans deeper and deeper into a deadly pocket. Then his cavalry swept around and sealed the trap from behind, surrounding tens of thousands of Roman soldiers with no way left to escape. What followed was a slaughter, as Hannibal's men crushed the trapped legions from every side in the single bloodiest day Rome would ever suffer. Nearly the entire Roman army was destroyed in a matter of hours, and their banners and eagles fell broken into the blood-soaked dust. By dusk, the vast field lay silent and covered in Roman shields, and it remains one of the most perfect and devastating victories ever won in war. The news of Cannae struck Rome like a thunderbolt. The terrified city plunged into mourning, certain that Hannibal would now march straight through their gates. Yet astonishingly, Hannibal did not attack the city of Rome itself, a fateful decision that many believe cost him his single greatest chance at total victory. Instead, his army wintered in captured Italian cities, growing comfortable and slowly softening after so many long and brutal years of constant marching and war. Meanwhile, Rome refused to surrender, quietly raising fresh new legions and training them hard, determined to wear the invader down through sheer endurance. For years, Hannibal roamed Italy undefeated, but with no reinforcements arriving, his exhausted army slowly shrank, while his enemies only grew stronger around him. Then came a crushing personal blow, when Romans defeated and killed his own brother, cruelly delivering the terrible news of his death straight to Hannibal's camp. Alone and surrounded in hostile land, Hannibal held on with iron will, but the long tide of the war was finally beginning to turn against him at last. Far away, a brilliant young Roman general named Scipio struck back hard, conquering Carthage's rich lands in Spain and stealing away Hannibal's vital supply. Then Scipio made a bold and daring move, carrying the war across the sea to attack the homeland of Carthage in North Africa directly. Desperate and afraid, the leaders of Carthage finally begged Hannibal to abandon Italy and rush home to defend the very city where he had been born. After 15 long years on enemy soil, the bitter Hannibal was forced to leave Italy behind, his lifelong dream of destroying Rome slipping away unfinished. He returned at last to Carthage, the homeland he had left as a small boy, now his people's final and only hope against the advancing Romans. In 202 BC, the two great generals finally met at Zama, as Hannibal and Scipio drew up their armies for the battle that would decide everything. Hannibal launched his war elephants forward, but the clever Romans simply opened lanes in their ranks and let the great beasts thunder harmlessly through. Then the armies collided in savage combat, and for the very first time in his entire life, the brilliant Hannibal found himself being slowly outmatched and beaten. His weary lines finally shattered, and the man who had terrified Rome for a generation suffered the first and only true defeat of his legendary career. Carthage was crushed and forced into a humiliating peace, its fleet burned and its power broken forever beneath the crushing heel of victorious Rome. But Rome still feared him, and when they demanded his surrender, the proud Hannibal slipped away into exile rather than be handed over in chains. For years, the aging exile wandered from court to court, advising foreign Eastern kings, still burning with his old dream of one day striking back at Rome. But Rome never forgave and never forgot, relentlessly hunting the old general down until at last their agents cornered him in a remote hillside villa. Refusing to be dragged through Rome as a trophy, Hannibal calmly took poison and ended his own life, still unbroken and defiant to his very final breath. Yet his legend never died, for his impossible march across the Alps and his masterpiece at Cannae are still studied in war academies to this very day. Hannibal of Carthage, the one-eyed general who crossed the Alps with elephants, remains forever remembered as the greatest nightmare Rome ever faced. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more legendary stories from history's darkest and greatest figures.